Welcome everyone for the panel. And what we're going to do is first to talk about the value creation levers. How is it changing for enterprise software? We want to keep the answers short so that we have a lot of things to cover, so we can go through it. And it's not a one-way thing. You're going to ask questions, you're going to answer. If you have other questions or others, we can make it more a roundtable discussion. Please feel free to interject and agree, disagree. We don't have to go one by one, so we can make it more interactive. So that was all idea. I want to start with Susan. Susan, you have an excellent background working for private equity firms. I see from your profile you are chief of staff for the CEO of Vista, which is a pioneer in driving some of these areas in enterprise value creation. Now with TCV, and TCV has a great portfolio of both growth companies, even company like Airbnb, to more traditional private equity firm based companies. So how do you see and you've been, written the initial playbook for enterprise software. How do you see the value creation playbook for enterprise software changing? What are some of the new additions in your toolkit?
Great question. And certainly TCV, we're all about growth. We look for companies that have good bones. And what my team and I do is provide them with best practices that allow for them to grow exponentially with a lot more confidence than they would without our help. I mean, we certainly, and the beauty of portfolio operations and also with partnering with companies like that are represented today is we don't just look at one company, we look at many and bring best practices that we know have worked time and time again, and introduce them to accelerate that growth. So, I don't know that it's certainly with COVID there was a cost optimization that we all probably doubled down on within the last year plus. That being said, in what I've seen is it's all about sustainable growth and making sure that even beyond our ownership, that next investor, the next acquirer sees the longevity of the company and can foresee a ton of potential even beyond our ownership.
Got it. And so I want to jump into James. And James, you are new. We have been working together for a long time, and you've been a CTO, and now coming into as a CTO for Marlin, and you have a whole portfolio of companies. And Susan talked about cost optimization as a key lever. You looked at it in the last year, but we also see a lot of your portfolio companies compete with the VC-funded fast growth companies. So you have to optimize your costs, but you also have to drive innovation in these companies and help them grow. So what are the things you are, as an outside-in view, you're now looking at a vantage point, look at 20-odd companies. So what are you seeing? What are the observations? What are your focus areas?
Thank you for acknowledging my role as still an outsider. I'm kind of getting used to the private equity life. So for those of you that I don't know, I spent most of my life in Valley companies, kind of competing against a lot of like VC funded companies, and I guess still do. I think, as Susan mentioned, cost optimization is always part of the equation. And you look at how companies grow, and I think various folks like invest at different levels. And I think the higher the investment, probably the more crud you find in the R&D organization. Like inertia takes over, and our job is to kind of stem that tide and figure out how to cost optimize. That's like a baseline for anything that we do. However, I do tend to focus a little bit more on the growth side. I think that, if you look at sort of like a scatter plot of, like your holding period and the state of technology, and you can kind of figure out like what your risk tolerance is, meaning like what sorts of investment we can make on the growth side. So if you have like a 3-year holding period, and the company is in terrible shape in terms of like their technology, you might look at it on the diligence side and say, okay, here's how much we can do, and then you have to work with the investors to figure out whether that actually makes sense. Assuming that we sort of pass all those checks, we first, look at security and we look at cost and make sure that the foundation is pretty good. But foundation doesn't really, kind of pay the bills at the end on exit. It's a lot of this is like buying the house, like Susan mentioned, good bones. So you need that as a solid foundation. Then we look at, okay, how can, I think that the list earlier touched on a lot of the things that we're seeing, companies that need to modernize. Some of that helps with cost, actually, being able to run like serverless and more elastic, will help with their infrastructure costs and grow, their growth trajectory. But really, we kind of look at, opening up the architecture, making sure we can do new things. Most of them that we're investing in don't have a great data strategy. Most of them don't have a great UX strategy. They haven't really adapted to the new world. And so like I'm seeing develop a common pattern of modernization, openness, data, UI, UX work. And then obviously everybody varies a little bit, but those are some of the common patterns. So that they can compete with some of the VC funded companies, which is a little bit of a stretch given that we do care about profitability and things at the end.
Correct. And you do have a good set of customers who are sticky, and that's a differentiation compared to a VC funded company. They probably don't have this set of customers, trusted relationship over a long period of time. That's a differentiation for some of your companies, right?
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. Like when you have like calculable multiples, it's tough. Like, it's good to have, but on the VC side, it's very easy. Like we have no product, we have no customer. We don't even hope to be profitable for like a dozen years. Give us a bunch of money. It's like, that's a great business.
Got it. Here you got to transform the company, and you have to also, keep your existing customers happy who might not want to change. It's interesting. So we'll come back to you on that, James. I want to go into Bala's. Bala, you have a very diverse experience, worked in consulting companies. You've been running Tech Stars in India, which is a innovative startup incubator. And before that, you've been running product management in companies like Yahoo. Now with Vista, and Vista again is very interesting because you kind of build initial playbooks, but now pretty much every private equity firm wants to have an enterprise software story. And so what are the new secrets are you cooking up to add more value? Because companies are getting expensive, unlike before.
Very true, Pari. I think that's one thing that we have realized is that the Vista's focus in terms of enterprise software is now becoming a playbook everywhere. So obviously, the market is getting very competitive. So we got to keep up in terms of what we do next there. So the whole idea is also in terms of the transformation journey. We hope that Vista being known for what it does gives us a little bit of leverage in terms of our deals and transactions. We're very focused, has been focused for a very long period of time. And our particular, one of the key investments that Vista has made, and Susan knows this better than I do, I've given her tenure in Vista earlier, is the whole internal VCG construct, which is very dedicated, focused, and fully committed to the value creation aspect. So if there is anything in Vista that they walk the talk, it's on the value creation aspect, where and Regina can also talk about it. She's from Mindbody as well. So the providing the support exactly in the point of where James talked about is where we see the next action is. In fact, I'm just coming off of a meeting where with a portfolio company where they are looking at investments in terms of their talent pool and locations, and cost was not even on the cards. In fact, they said of the 3 drivers that they want to index on, cost was the last one. So the first one is primarily everything is getting digital. So the context here is because most of all our companies are in the enterprise digital space, we are seeing quite a lot of movement in the market with respect to everything getting digital, and COVID is also has acted as an accelerator in that sense. Time to market, there is a premium to it, and there is time to market and getting good quality talent. There is more premium, and I'm seeing that the conversation has shifted from focusing on cost and then the rest, everything else being sweetener, exactly in the other way around, and actually focusing on the access to talent and how fast I can move into the market, and the cost is a sweetener. And this is the shift which I think you will see the industry kind of, in my opinion, I think the industry will catch on to, but we are already seeing very quick trends in that space.
Interesting. You're talking about to drive all of the talent, the technology, you need a set of talent access, and that becomes much more important lever than the cost part. Great. So I want to move into Regina. Regina, again, you are one of the only practitioner, I would say. All of us are consultants here. And we spoke to 3 operating partners till now. And tell us now, how are the operating partners helping you in driving the charter, what you want to achieve?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I joined.
Bala is not in the call.
Bala is amazing. He's the best. He is the best in the portfolio. I joined Mindbody about 30 days before the deal closed with Vista. So I want to believe that we would have gotten someplace with my joining, but the truth is that Vista gave us a really solid playbook for how to execute on value creation. We covered the ground everywhere from as Bala and others mentioned, data modernization. We looked at that. We looked at our strategy for moving into cloud and elasticity. We reviewed our product growth and roadmap strategy and kind of reimagined that all together. We also created our Center of Excellence, and actually that's how I came to know Zinnov on this call. Because at this point we are about 50% deployed in Pune, but at the time we were 0 deployed in Pune, except for a little bit of quality work that we were doing with a third party that we later acquired. I would say that when I joined Mindbody, what was interesting is that it had started as a tech company. I don't for sure want to undermine those characteristics, but it did not start in the Valley. So it is a company that was sort of sitting in Central Coast, California. It had a little bit different DNA. And so the tech chops were in need of some investment. And for sure, when I joined, we were a collection of apps because we had grown by acquisition. And we had very, very well-intentioned leaders who were all recognizing that we were a collection of apps, but it was taking more than a fair share of time to steer that towards being a really, a much more robust service-oriented platform. Sorry, Pari, go ahead.
Yeah, so Regina, so one add on to the question I had is, you have competition like Zinnov, right? And Zinnov is a very popular name in India right now, over $1 billion in market cap, competing with Mindbody for the same market, and a very different model, right? Because they have all of engineering, very few product managers in the US. Even the go-to-market is because you spell those spas and other health providers, they're able to sell online without a lot of field sales team. So if you think about competition, so how do you now think about competing with companies like that from a product roadmap? Your product is a lot more sophisticated. You've been in the market for a long time. So how do you think of competition like that?
So we love to talk about Zinnov and others who we compete with in the space. And at the end of the day, what we know is that our product is better. And we know that because we typically win back customers who have migrated away to Zinnov, primarily because they've been given very aggressive pricing. And so it's enticing to try. But when they get there, what they find is that they had a better product with Mindbody. So there's certainly work that Mindbody can do on the core side to add more self-service components into the product and to create a much more joyful onboarding experience on the core product. We're also meeting with our board tomorrow to talk about adding another product to the portfolio, which addresses our solopreneurs, which represent 85% of the overall wellness market. So for us, of course, and product marketing also sits in my area, we spend a lot of time looking at the competition. What we know for sure is that we've got a better playbook and we've got a better product. And a lot of that for sure has been facilitated by having a really extraordinary private equity company shepherding us through our evolution process. Yes.
Great, Regina. I think it's interesting. You have an awesome product, but you need to add that sales service. You need to add the additional, which is to make the customer experience interesting, fascinating. I want to jump into Gaurav. Gaurav, you've been Alix Partners, one of the pioneers in this area, helping private equity firms and the portfolio companies transform over the last 25 years or more. And you are known as an organization known for really optimizing cost transformation of these companies. How is your experience working with more traditional manufacturing industrial companies to enterprise software companies? So what is different, and is your, in terms of the requests you're getting from companies, is it changing in terms of your offering itself? Great to hear the evolution. Give us a little bit on how things are changing.
Yeah, sure. It's nice to meet you all. So I've been with Alix Partners for about a decade. And then before that, I worked for industry, GE Capital. And, Alix Partners, while it started out 35 years ago with a heritage of working on restructuring of companies, that is now a minority of the business. The majority of the business is working with companies at all stages of their life cycle, all kinds of profitable, life cycles and evolutions on improvement agendas. So with that context, here's a theme that I've spotted as more or less being pervasive the last couple of years, right? What used to be a cost-oriented discussion has changed to an efficiency-oriented discussion.
Okay.
And while it's a word, that word is really meaningful. It's really significant because it sort of inspires a different set of reactions and hormones. And when you talk to portfolio companies with private equity firms, and when you focus on efficiency, what you are saying is, I want to make you more agile. I want to make you more nimble. I want to declutter all of the clutter you have that's costing you money and is not accretive from an ROIC standpoint, right? So are you being wise about how you're deploying capital? And that's human capital, that's working capital, it's cash, it's all forms of capital. And when you pose the question in that manner, it shifts the lens, because what the PE firm is not telling the portfolio company is to take out money and we're going to throttle your investments in growth and your ability. What the PE firm is saying to the portco is that if you're a portco, for example, that's flat, has been flat for 7 years, and we bought you as a cash cow, well, by rechanneling the money you spend into growth, if you can shift from zero growth to a CAGR of 3% over the next 5 years, you command a different valuation. You'll go from a 5x multiple to a 12x multiple, and that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
So it's an example, just to add on what Gaurav you said, example, moving from an on-prem to a SaaS product has seen that multiple change in companies. So is that an example of what you would say?
Yeah, as long as that fits with the strategy. So going to SaaS from prem is not an end on of itself. It's a means to an end. What is going to cloud doing for you, for your customers, for your markets? If you're an enterprise software provider and you are all on-prem, then I guess your positioning is right, because the future is not on-prem, right? But there's certainly use cases why on-prem may work better, but there are a minority of use cases. So yeah, I would say if you think about it from a enterprise software provider, standpoint, making the shift from on-prem to cloud is table stakes.
Sure. Okay. Got it. So it's very clear that there's a shift happening from cost, even in your discussions with customers, from to growth, and how the growth could trigger a significant amount of value.
Actually, I want to add one more point.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
And so when you study, if you break down large companies, I'm not only talking about like enterprise software, I'm talking about financial services, tech, all different kinds of companies, and you scrutinize their IT spend, and you parse through how much are they spending on run versus how much they're spending on build. most companies that we have come across are spending far more on run than build. The pipeline of build opportunities is very large, and the money that can be handed out is sort of, it's 1:5. Only $1 of 5 requests are getting funded, not because the 4 are bad requests, but just because of the clutter and the inefficiencies in run are constraining how much money you can spend on capital and growth. And that is the pervasive theme across $45 billion companies and $300 million companies.
Very interesting. So they're going to shift. So there is a fixed budget, and you're going to shift that to the more innovation. It could be build, or it could be the product side. It's really building new products, moving into SaaS and all of that. But you have a set of customers, or internal customer, external customer to support. And how do you do that meaningfully to drive that? They're very interesting. Susan,
I actually have one more thing to add, because I think that's really an important point where, back to my comment on it's not a cost play per se. Yeah. Then again, when we look at many of the companies we invest in, look at their support organizations or implementation organizations as they grow, they need more people. And it's just like this linear line that's like never ending. Yeah. And so as opposed to allowing for that to continue, we look at how can we be smarter. And so in essence, it's a cost play in one part of the organization. And then let's take those resources or that budget and allocate it to perhaps product or engineering or sales or somewhere else where it'll inevitably drive growth. So once again, I think it's not necessarily, we haven't abandoned the cost play, we've just repackaged it in such a way that allows, and it's all about efficiency and allocating budget to the areas of the business that will enable that sustainable growth.
So Susan, you brought in a very interesting point of how, as a company grows, you got to add linear resources to be able to implement your product across, right? And you look at even a company like APN, which is now $14 billion valuation, a lot of revenue used to come from professional services. Now they are structurally, the investors are forcing them to reduce professional services and work with partners for doing the implementation, so they can focus on building the product and driving SaaS revenue. How are you driving this change? Because still customers expect you to come and say, my problem is unique, your product doesn't really fit, I want some customization. How are you handling it? Is partners playing a role in driving that?
Yeah, I think this is where, and there's a recent acquisition of ours, that the product roadmap is a laundry list of just the customers that have, and I know Regina can relate to this one, the customers that are the loudest and all the customizations, I want this field on this, particular page, et cetera, et cetera. And first and foremost, it needs to start with a retraining the organization, because I think in their view, that's being very customer centric. Like whatever the customer wants, we want to deliver. Well, bless your hearts, as we say in Texas, that's serving a couple customers, but it's not serving your larger, broader ecosystem of customers and eventually your prospects. And so it's kind of pivoting the organization to think in that vein, to allow for those one-offs to not necessarily end up on the roadmap. There may be some that do, given the size or scale of those particular customers, but it's a very small subset, and instead your product roadmap is focused on those larger, bigger rocks. And you leverage partners to either do that customization and you drive those conversations, but it's got to start with a reformulation of how the organization views their customers in these one-off types of asks, and making sure that their talk track is such that you don't dissuade those customers from being long-term customers.
I'm pretty sure that's a big culture change. I see, Regina, it'd be great to hear from you. Do you see the similar kind of challenge when you came in?
Absolutely. When I joined, I remember asking a question, where's our roadmap? And I got this list of things. And I said, this is not a roadmap, this is a list. And the team was like, this is a roadmap, we need to get these things done. And I was like, this is not a roadmap. So I was really grateful actually to work against the Vista playbook on roadmap, because I was insisting that we didn't have one, and this was a nice way to bring a hammer in without me having to introduce the hammer myself. We do have a proper roadmap now that is tied to key growth concepts, and it does give us a nice way to say no to the tiny customizations that really take us off track, and yes to the larger opportunities that are really going to contribute to our overall growth. And so the practice of both the art and the science of it has really changed and been accelerated in a very extraordinary way just by having some of the discipline coming from PE.
Great. And Sandeep, you is that a role you play in freeing up and making the change easier as a partner, taking over some of the custom engineering work?
Right. So this is a very interesting area. So if you look at the discussion right now, so I can give you an example. So for example, we are working with a security company. Now they face the same things, right? Their customers will come and say, hey, what if you had a UX that looked and felt like this? And what if you had a migration utility for migrating from this XYZ platform to your platform and so on and so forth? Now the choice for them is either they take all those requests for enhancements and build that as a product, this thing, or we work with them as partners. We build IP around that. They have their own marketplaces where we list those IPs, and we basically enable their customers to get what they want to get while not, being, detracting the company from their product roadmap. So there are many such places where we have built IPs around our partner or our customers, IP or products, which have then been either OEM'd or put on their marketplace, or we go directly to market with them, whether it is in the case of Appian that you referred to, or whether it is many others. So there is definitely a play for partners like ourselves to complement in a very healthy manner the whole ecosystem and be able to fulfill customer demands, and hence, take the distance to revenue shorter. So definitely there's a big play there.
You are measured on linear revenue anywhere, right? Your market looks at you not like a product company where your multiple per engineer is much different.
Right. But this also helps from that perspective where, if you are able to create IP like this, build once, it's a rinse and repeat, right? So you build it once, you are able to take it to many customers, you are able to factor it in your services play as well, and you are able to win bigger services deals against your competition and use it as a differentiator. So it is a very symbiotic play with the product companies where we can do all these things together.
Got it. Staying with what Gaurav mentioned about, there's a fixed budget and want to build between, build versus manage. And again, coming back to James, you have a vantage point on looking at all of these companies from a technology perspective, right? When you look at it, what do you see? Is that very similar to what Gaurav said? Gaurav talked about from an IT context, but in a product context, is it 80% in serving existing customers, and then 20% you got to do all these nice things you talked about, right? Data, strategy, AI, UX change, and all of that. Where do you find the money, and how do you now optimize the budget to be able to do all of this?
Yeah, I think a lot of these things end up tying together, and there's not one right answer. It kind of depends a little bit on where a particular portco happens to be. And I think that, the general case of what everyone seems to be talking about is, I think a lot of the portcos lack a model for really understanding, kind of like what the full cost, like the long-term cost of saying yes to something is. Like, I think they don't realize it. They take a really short-term view. Like, if I say yes to this, I get this. That's my whole analysis. And it leads to some, probably everybody studied computer science. Like, you have these like traveling salesman problems. Like pretty soon you've like painted yourself into a corner. You've said yes to a bunch of things that on the surface make sense. And then eventually you have no money, you're back to this, like, 5 is to 1 for like keeping the lights on versus, innovation. And you're like, wow, how did that happen? It's like, well, some pretty rational decisions led you there. And I think, what we try to do with our portfolio companies, or what I'm starting to do, is, question more like instead of like looking at the opportunity of saying yes, I look at, what's the real cost of saying no? Like what if you do 0 of those things that people ask for? And people don't really have a full model, like understanding, well, is anybody else in the market saying yes to these things? What am I saying no to by saying yes to this thing? Or what can I do if I say no to this? And what does that open up? And again, this depends a lot on how big the organizations are. The part of the market that we play in, these folks are kind of just getting to be big enough to be dangerous. And they probably got there by saying yes to everything.
So how do you blame the sales force which are forcing to build these features? Hey, I can make this $1 million sale if you make this one feature.
Yeah, I think that never ends. I mean, I think, like using like Informatica as an example, from the time we were like a 7 million a year company to a $1 billion a year company, you had some reps saying that. And it was true, right? Like it's their livelihood, like for like making their quota, that you do this one thing and they can promise it and they can be the good guy. And so, all you can do is try to have a rational conversation with them about, other prospects and how they can make up for it. Like, if we don't do this, we can maybe support you in this other way. We can still have a conversation with a customer about what they really need and about all the things we'll be doing kind of by not doing this. That works in about like 5% of the cases. And then you have to like appeal to like their management and everything. It's not an easy thing, right? So like I can't at the point of decision, like it's definitely a hard thing because you're saying no to somebody. Nobody likes that. Very few reps take a long-term view of things. You kind of don't want them to. But that's kind of the discipline, right? You sometimes have to upset people in order to like make a good long-term investment. And that's kind of the job. And so part of what we do is instill that model. And I just always tell them, just blame me. Like, you don't, like, if you're like the sales manager and like you want to say yes to this, but I'm saying to say no, just blame me. Like, you don't have to take responsibility yourself. And you'll thank me later, even though you'll curse me now.
Okay.
I think that, and I agree with James, it works in so little cases, but that underscores the importance of having a strong relationship between sales and product. And quite frankly, understanding how many deals are you saying no to because we don't have this thing, and what is the ROI on actually doing it, and alternatively, in equipping sales with the product roadmap on what you've truly committed to, and you don't want to like have this like fuzzy, we're going to do everything in a year or two, but more so if you can equip your sales folks with, these are the things that we're going to deliver in the next iteration or the next version of our software, and get those customers excited about those things, and distract them a bit on the one-off types of requests.
Interesting. The coaching in the sales teams on the product roadmap is very critical for them to be able to drive this. It's very interesting linkage because it's an integrated value chain, right? So.
And once again, I don't, in a lot of the companies that we invest in, I don't see strong ties between sales and product. And, more so product just gets annoyed by sales because they keep throwing over new laundry lists of things that customers want and saying yes to it. So, that's one of the things that we just look at initially. And address. I think it's not only establishing a true product roadmap as Regina's done, but secondarily, making sure that there is that cross communication and good relationship building between those orgs, to ensure that we are meeting those customer needs and understanding the pros and cons of going after certain feature functions.
Totally agree. And I was just going to offer, I know Bala is going to jump in here, but what was interesting for us is that while we were given some best practices to implement on the product and engineering side, our sales team was as well, including deal desk and, sort of doing a better job of tracking win-loss data. And I think Susan is absolutely right that the relationship there is one that really does have to be reimagined for many of us. In Mindbody's case, we were definitely being dictated features by our sales team. So it wasn't that there was no relationship, but it wasn't the most pleasant relationship. And then, kind of flipping that into a proper growth roadmap planning process that includes looking very carefully at win-loss data and looking very carefully at what happened when deals went to the deal desk. And, all of these practices that have been implemented across the business have made it so much easier to decide which things we have to do and which things we should not do in favor of investing in other more attractive growth opportunities.
Very interesting, Regina. And Bala, you had a point, and I have another question for you, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think just to add on to it, it's a very delicate balance, like Susan said and James and Regina said. One of the things that we have noticed internally, we have a bit of a guide that can help the decision making. It's some sort of rule of 40 or whatever you call it, publicly. But internally for Vista, we have a similar one, which is to how much can your investment dollars come from your growth, that you create. So the growth plus your investment need to add up to 40. So you get constrained if you think like that. And I think, if every company can come up with, it doesn't have to be 40, you can do a 50 or a 30, depending on it. So if you want to invest more, you need to grow more. And so that obviously brings into focus these two and forces both sides to work together. Otherwise, it just doesn't do that. The second framework that we use as some version of it is the tech debt versus market debt, right? So it's important for us to understand that you start building features for everybody who's asking you, you create tech debt, right? So, but at the same time, you don't, then you create market debt. So there is a healthy debate that kind of comes into see, which is higher. I mean, if you start looking at it from this lens, you can actually look at what needs to be prioritized and how we need to prioritize. The third point that we tell is most often we have blinkers on, like inside the organization, when we say it takes so much to build it, but why do you have to build it, right? I mean, there are other solutions like work with a partner, and that's probably in many cases that's more smarter solution than building it yourself, because you are you should not look at yourself as cleaning the deck yourself or building everything, every screw to build your own ship, but rather how do I steer the ship?
But engineers have that mentality, right, Bala? Engineers want to build everything themselves.
Very true, and that goes to what James said. It works in 5% of the cases. but I think it's important to bring that question. I think, in my opinion, a lot of things can change, dramatically if only we ask this question. I want this, but should I build it myself?
So what is the first framework? So Bala, one of your roles is to really, going again back to what Gaurav said, hey, I have $100. How do this build versus the manage? I got to manage it, and they come to you and say, hey, now you are the expert on global locations, global centers. Give me a roadmap in terms of how to do this. I have 5 things to do. I'm doing only one thing in the roadmap. I'm spending a sort of managing. So when they come to you, how do you approach it? The VP of engineering, or you proactively go to them, or they come to you? What's your thought process?
It's both. There is proactive conversation. There is also conversations when there is a need and they come, and both are fine, right? Sure. Because we got to continue to have this dialogue, and then we have what is called as a business best practices sharing summit, which is again a fantastic initiative where every portco comes and says, here's where our problem was, here's how we handled it, and they kind of present their internal case studies, so others learn from doing it. So I think that's a great way, because the peer learning is the best. Frankly, somebody from outside who does not have too much skin in the game coming and telling, it does not work as much as a peer, another portco telling you. Like if Regina tells, another CTO or CPO will listen, because it's
compared to you telling them.
Absolutely. So in fact, in most cases, our job is to just point to right person who has been there, done that, and help them out. But at the same time, what Regina's experience might be very contextual to Mindbody. We help in terms of broadening that to think about it in a little more, broader context. But the starting point in terms of credibility has to be a shared experience of someone who's done it, and that works like a charm. Then we have a conversation saying, well, this is how it has worked in Mindbody. Let me tell you, there are 3 other factors you need to kind of keep in mind for in your situation. So then help them through the contextualization in their particular situation. my opinion, they are the ones who need to make decisions. If somebody comes and says, I'm looking for answers, I don't have any answers. In fact, if I have an answer, it'll be really bad for me to tell the answer, because then you will not believe in it or you will not be committed to it. So it's better I help you in providing data points and bringing others who have had a similar experience, and then you feel like you are supported enough that you have all the data points to make your decision. So this is primarily the approach that that has worked, right? Because we have all sorts of frameworks, but everybody wants to believe in their own framework.
The
there are
practitioners want to learn from other practitioners.
Yeah,
got it.
right.
Got it. And so another topic I want to jump into, and Sandeep, feel free to jump in if you have any specific questions or to add on to the discussion as well. On the talent side, now to do all of this, we need access to really high quality talent, and what we see right now, be it in the Bay Area, US is going to grow at 7-8% a year, and the talent is all going into these two distinct set of companies, right? One is GAFAM, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and they have tons of money. And Amazon free cash flow last year was $60 billion. They bought MGM at $8 billion, and say $8 billion is pocket change for Amazon to buy a studio, right? It's unbelievable how these companies have the power to have access to this talent across. So now everybody has to drive the digital transformation. And Gaurav, you would have seen, that's a big area you talked about, driving that. How are you addressing the talent challenge of your customers, and what has been the big advice or best practice?
So I can start, and then I can hand over to the folks.
Yeah.
So see, while we are a services company, we are focused on the tech side, and all our businesses doing products for companies like Mindbody and others, and the portcos of all the leading Ps. So we vie for the same set of talent, and more or less for us, the scaling is done offshore or in nearshore locations and so on. So we are seeing the same kind of a thing. The thing out there is, we have to be the sharpest knife in whatever we do. If we are able to afford good work for our employees, if we are able to attract the good talent by showcasing to them that we work with the best, and we have a good training engine, because see, all said and done, the amount of trained people in the market is going to be a handful. And the technologies are also the way AWS worked 3 years, 4 years back, and the way they do a new release every few weeks of new features. Unless you have a very strong engine to upskill your people, whether it is AWS, Azure, any other technologies, even snowflakes of this world didn't exist at that scale 4 years back. So you need to have, number one, a good way to bring in people, a good way to keep training them, moving them up, and be able to give them good kind of work. Have an equivalent of a VCG in-house, which is basically also consulting with customers and our own employees. So a bunch of these things add up to being the sharpest in town and to be able to compete with the who's who, to be able to attract the talent that we need. But I'll be very happy and curious to know the other point of views as well.
Sure.
I was just going to add to that. And first of all, I had not mentioned how Mindbody has connected with Persistent, but Anand, the first CEO of the company, was a friend for over 20 years. And so it was really easy to come back to Persistent when we needed some assistance. In our case, we were not hiring as fast as we had plans to deliver a product. And so we called Persistent on a number of occasions. And in fact, we're working on a project now, the one I talked about earlier, the solo product that we'll be bringing to market, because we needed people in advance of completing our hiring. And so Persistent jumped right in. They've been working with us over the last 6 months to create the MVP for that product. And we've also hired people now and are kind of working on transition. So that has been incredible. We've also worked with Persistent for a number of products that we needed to bring into the larger platform, but we're not quite there yet. FitMetrics is one of those that is in our fitness portfolio, but needed to be part of the core product. And so Persistent assisted with helping us to performance tune that product. And now we're going to be bringing it into the core Mindbody product. We have found at least 7 different use cases for needing to work with a supremely good business partner in market. And because we're deployed in Pune and Persistent also has a headquarter in Pune, it also made it easier for our teams to work together a lot more closely. So, obviously cost continues to be something that we all talk about. In our case, we are on a journey from decreasing our R&D spend to revenue from 28% down to 18%. That's quite a journey, right? And so we do have to be thoughtful about how we deploy our dollars to get
and still do the new things, right?
Get done, exactly. But we have found some great partnerships in the journey, and Persistent is certainly one of them.
Super. Regina, you talked about Pune as a location, and we talking about talent. It'd be great to hear, James, what are the locations you look at it and say, the same talent constraint, how do you now helping your companies address it? Where are you kind of pointing to them? India, Ukraine, Latin America. So what is like you pick your poison, you let them kind of choose it, or you kind of guide them in that process?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on where they are. Ostensibly, I'm supposed to be looking at North American companies, but I end up working with European and North American. So we do look at Eastern Europe because of time zone proximity and to both the development center and some of the customers for our European companies. For North America, we do look at South America because of time zone affinity. And then India is just talent availability. I think all these other locations are good, but you have certain phenomena like UiPath buying up Romania, development. And so, you at some point you hit some natural governors. So it depends a little bit on where the company is. I think that COVID has sort of taught us that we're sort of more flexible in that way than we thought we were. So, everybody's working remotely. The time zone issue, I as you know, I lived for years, managing a pretty big team in Bangalore. And so you're kind of ruining somebody's day, morning or night. There's no way about it around it coming from California. People are pretty flexible to a point in that regard. And I think that talent availability is the biggest driver. When you think about, kind of like time zone affinity or other things, I think that we're willing to give on a lot of those variables, but not talent. I think, I don't know, was it Gaurav that mentioned, earlier? Yeah, I think that actually there's a premise, that it's maybe as PE companies, the first thing you should do is go in and have massive turnover in R&D, even if you don't need to from a cost perspective, but to bring in new talent and to bring in a new perspective. Formative experience I had early in my career, working at Oracle in the early days, was the kernel got a lot better once all the old timers left. We thought it'd be fatal. We thought we'd have to shut the place down, and it got a lot better. It's hard to see now because Oracle is a behemoth, but when I joined, it was not even $1 billion. It's a small place, and there were all these guys that knew the code, and they left, and we survived, and the database got better.
So don't be afraid.
I sort of thought about that a lot, over the years. And when we look at it now, a lot of the themes that we've been talking about, modernization, and all almost every dimension, the companies that we work with, not only are they not competing for the top Valley engineers, but you go to the locales that these guys operate in, the middle of the United States or some, random location, they're not even in the running, for these guys. And people that wouldn't even make it in the door at Silicon Valley companies are their top engineers. And we're the best thing I can do for you is move, the center of your R&D operation somewhere else where we can get super experienced talent that's, on top of new technologies, that's probably done a lot of the things that you need to do already somewhere else. So I think it's like pretty critical that we open up people's eyes to what they can do. And there's a lot of fear, around it, and we kind of get them over that.
Got it. I think it's the key thing to don't be afraid of changing your R&D team when you come into a company. And Susan, how do you see it? TCV companies, again, a lot of them are Bay Area based. It's a struggle for talent. How has COVID remote work changed the viewpoint of remote talent, global talent for your companies?
Well, I agree with James. I mean, I think it's proven out that we don't necessarily need people in office every day of the week or to even relocate. We've always believed in finding the right talent. And I think that's where, being part of a firm, and Vista does a great job of this, where, the talent that you bring in, we all want to make a difference. We all want purpose and to be able to see tangible results. And I think you're kind of guaranteed that when you come into either a Vista company or a TCV company, or where there's high expectation, but obviously there's also, big results provided you perform. So, it's attracting the right level of talent, allowing them to see that they can have a longevity within either the Vista or TCV ecosystem. Certainly I do believe, the days of being remote 24/7 I think people want to come back together.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? And do you require every exec, every employee to be there every day? We're definitely more open-minded now than ever. And I think that's where too, we do see especially on the dev side and certain areas, there is challenge to finding and attracting the right talent. And this is where, back to my example of a current acquisition of ours, we're looking at building out a new product. And it's one where, you look at, do we want to ramp up and hire a bunch of people to go do this for a fixed, the next year plus? Or do we want to partner with someone? And I think inevitably the right decision is partnering with folks like yourself. You've got the resources, you know how to execute. And this is, more of a, one-off versus something that will be, needed long-term for those companies. So yeah, we're getting really creative nowadays.
Yeah. Interesting. And one of the other challenges companies have is in terms of quality of talent and having some baseline for that. So one of the things we have seen Vista companies, when Vista acquires a company, there's a lot of resistance about the new test everybody has to take at Vista, right? And every HR team revolves and then they all agree. So Bala, it'd be great to hear from you in terms of experience of that and how is it helping? And because in a country like India, there are this IITs, the top institutes, and in every country you have these premium schools. And many times the HR teams are, I would say, call it, there's no HR in this room, lazy to say, hey, I'll go to the premium school, hire the people, easy for me to do it, but not do the hard work to mine the quality of talent and the rest of the ecosystem. But these tests we run, is that helping?
It's a challenge, but at the same time, it forces us to really think through our talent strategy more deeply. I think if we cannot afford to be lazy. If this CCAT hurdle wasn't there, I think our companies would be a little more lazier in terms of throwing dollars to hire people. And CCAT hurdle makes it a lot more, thoughtful about invest, because you have to invest in the person. Like, nobody would take just suddenly a CCAT and expect they don't even understand. So that means there would be more education, there would be more engagement with the candidates. That by force, you have to do it for your candidate to go through this process and all that stuff. So it definitely has, obviously we can hire much faster if this wasn't there, but having it being there has helped. Once somebody gets in, they get it, right? So the retention of the talent has been better, and as well as the quality of the talent that we are able to bring in is better. But obviously the funnel is a little slower, right? So I think with the competition with the talent, in my opinion, the next World War after we are done with the COVID is going to be either on water or on talent. this it's kind of become like that, right? So with the technology becoming a lot more pervasive and a lot more complex, and the cycles are becoming so faster, and obsolescence cycles are also becoming very faster. I don't think we will run out of the competition for talent. And so this is definitely a muscle that every company will have to continue to keep building and making stronger.
Got it. And then Sandeep, just to add to what everybody talked about talent war, and you have a very strong infrastructure to building talent from universities and training them. How are you making that as a service for your customers? Can they now come and say, hey, I have all of these 100 engineers, I want them to reskill in this. Can they go through a persistent university to be able to drive it? Do you have any offer like that?
Yeah, so we are actively working, and in fact, that is one of the discussions we are having here with Bala as well. And if you look at it, and just for the other people, why Pari said this, if you look at it, we are in the services business. If we have to grow, the talent is very important for us to keep bringing in and keep scaling. So just for the context, in the last quarter, we had about 1,200 new employees, net of any attrition that we would have had. In the quarter before, we added 1,600 employees. And all of this is on a base of 10,800 6 months back. So we've roughly added in the last year about 29% of our complete strength. And part of it is lateral hires. Part of it is, people, we are going to the best engineering schools in India, and we bring them in. We have a structured training program for 6 months. 6 months, these guys don't do any, work which is worth $1 for us. But these guys are put through training programs in different streams based on their interest areas. Then they are given the real world problems, and then they shadow the people. And 6 to 9 months from their coming in the company, they are actually onto anything productive in terms of any revenue earning for us. So we absolutely are working with some of our customers, especially the ones who have been with us for a little longer period of time, doing this on a customer specific basis using our learning and development. And we have, for example, what we call as academies. So there is, for example, let's say Thermo Fisher Academy, and that is at a cusp of healthcare and certain technologies on the cloud and so on. So yes, Pari, we are doing that selectively and happy to explore that with more.
I think that'll be an interesting area where every customer is going to need that. I think we are probably, I'm getting a ping that we're going to get a few minutes, but I want to get some interesting perspective. A lot of you here, I've worked with Robert Smith and is a pioneer in this area. It'd be great to hear some, Rahul had put a question here. It'd be great to hear some anecdotes, interaction with Robert, any learnings. Susan, you've been worked with him very closely.
So, I mean, Robert's a pioneer in the whole concept of having an operating team within a PE firm. I mean, he was the first to think through that, implement it, and obviously everyone else is trying to replicate the Vista model. And so, I think his vision of not only providing operational excellence through Vista's consulting group, but certainly in connecting execs. I know Bala spoke of just the value of, being a CEO is a lonely job. You've got your board and then you've got your direct reports, but connecting CEOs, connecting, heads of product, connecting folks that can learn from each other is invaluable. And so, I think he's pioneered a lot of those things that now we're all putting in place in our respective firms. So, I give him a ton of credit in that regard, and Vista does a great job of it.
Yeah, Regina, your experience with Robert?
Has been extraordinary, both from the perspective that he has a very powerful philanthropic profile. So all portfolio companies, I think, benefit from the causes that he cares about and the ways that he demonstrates a wider view of the world. So from that perspective, and also from his leadership and engagement. Now, quite honestly, he is the overall CEO of the portfolio. So we spend much more time with our direct board of directors, which includes Martin Taylor, and that was one of his early employees in the Vista portfolio. But I do find that the model is a really sound one, right? That this focus on being operationally excellent, being excellent in the way that we do what we're doing, in addition to having this really relentless focus on growth and unlocking new value in the market has been a formidable combination. And to the point earlier about the value that the portfolio company plays in helping us to have mentors, supporters, et cetera. When we were ready to, for example, open our Center of Excellence in Pune, we got Finastra and the Power School to adopt us and to talk us through with their processes. There were many of us had experience with this before, but it was so nice to understand how to do it inside of the Vista portfolio. Similarly, as we looked at our cloud consolidation, right, we kind of joined into the overall Vista portfolio on cloud negotiation and pricing, and we're able to bring our pricing down pretty substantially there, working very closely with others to, you know, understand how our journeys were similar and different. So I found the relationship to be very, 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 very fruitful overall. And one of the things, you know, I think I will say is that it's one thing to know. It's another thing to have a managing framework that moves you in the direction of everyone knowing in a common way. And that knowing in a common way, I think, helps us to cut out a lot of the time that you waste convincing people of what the right way to do it is, and a lot more time just doing it, which I found really, really valuable.
Well, very interesting. I think we are running out of time. Any closing thoughts from anybody?
Actually, I have one thought that I think may be relevant and slightly incremental. So for context, we invited an executive of a $30 billion company to speak with our partner group earlier this week. And she is a woman of color. And she is, these are her words. I'm not like paraphrasing. I'm actually saying it the way she said it. She said, when I was promoted to the executive management team of the company, I'm the only female, like let alone female of color. And that is ludicrous. So these are her words. I'm not sort of, putting words. And, what I'll tell you is that the days of us showing up in, pitches for work, whether you're an enterprise services company or whatever industry you're at, with a non-diverse team aren't sort of, waning or coming to a close or, it's a risk over the next 5 years. It's happened. It's over. And there are two kinds of companies. There are companies that were ahead of the curve, and there were companies that are caught flat-footed, right? And for companies that are caught flat-footed, they are going to struggle enormously with enterprise sales, and if they do not show up with teams of color, with diverse teams. And so the other thing this colleague, this senior, female executive, professional said was, she said, when this new generation that is going to define the next, 50 years, we're not. I mean, not you guys. I'm not. I had my 50th birthday last year, and this is my last 10 years. I'm sort of on a glide path somewhere. I don't know where, but my sons are not, right? And this generation is going to run the play. And they do not have patience, and they do not want to join companies for when they look up and they don't find people like them, they will not join. They, when I graduated from college, GE hired me at a tiny pay, and I was just so grateful for getting a job, right? Mm-hmm. This generation is not. So we should think about, when you think about, about talent, I would suggest the first frame we should have is not about the best school, or it should be, how do I find places to get the best diverse talent, the best talent that, by the way, is also diverse. Not the best diverse talent, because that implies a separate hiring pool. It is, how do I get the best talent that I can get that is also diverse, and it exists. We just have to find it.
Great.
100%. 100%.
With that, thanks, Gaurav. That's a very, very important point, and everyone has to keep in mind. And that's going to, like, absolutely, from sales to valuation, all of that is going to play a major, major role in the next decade. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for a very interesting panel. And Sandeep, maybe you have to get all your CTOs of your companies come together, like almost how Vista does and Susan TCV does, to share.
Oh, lots of good points. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Over to Manas. I'll hand it back to you. And we will keep the engagement going. All of you have your email IDs and so on, so you can be connected, and we will continue to hear from us. Manas, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pari, and thank you everyone for that exciting session. I'll hand it over to Vaibhav to proceed with the closing note and formally close the proceedings for the day.
All right, I will not take much of your time. I know we've been talking for quite some time. Just 5 minutes of summary and maybe a few key points to ponder that we discussed today. I will leave you with that. On the talent side of thing, a lot of you spoke about how the access to quality of talent has a premium, and there are only few locations and few places where you can find the right talent in the right numbers, right? That said, the time to market also has a premium to it. So not just the quality of talent and the right numbers of talent, you need access to talent fast enough. And then in that sense, the talent availability is one of the biggest driver over any other factor when you choose to find out alternative locations and alternative sources of talent, right? And as Gaurav pointed out, diverse talent is the best talent. That's another key thing that we need to watch out. On the technology side, things are getting more and more complex every day. There's constant upgradation that is required for our teams and for our engineering folks. Strong product foundation is one of the key. Data, UI, UX, serverless, these are some of the new things that are keep coming every now and then. So that's kind of creating more and more challenges. And while you transition into these technologies, taking care of the customers who don't want to transition at the same time is one of the key challenges that a lot of software companies face today. Everything is pretty much getting digital, and that's kind of throwing a lot more challenges. In terms of the overall topic around efficiency and growth and roadmap, one of the points that came out is efficiency over cost. So basically be capital efficient, no matter what kind of capital it is, human capital, working capital, or any other capital. Invest those gains from efficiency into growth. Focus on how do you reduce efficiencies in the run process to create something more in the build? Reduce inefficiencies so that you can end up investing in the build. Need to find the right balance between tech debt and market debt. And the overall product roadmap has to be in sync with your growth plans, right? And with that said, the last point was largely around how do you do all of this, be efficient, take care of technology, take care of the right talent. One of the key factors that came out is need to find the right partners. You don't need to build everything yourself. You need to figure out ways to do it faster with the partners as well. Also pretty easier said than done, but finding the right partners can enable the product roadmap execution much faster and reduce your time to market. So that's about it. I'm sure there might be a lot more than that, but
so, yeah, Vaibhav, I'm impressed you're able to make these on the fly.
I know. I was just thinking, agile summarization, Vaibhav. Great job.
Thank you so much. All right. So with that, thank you all for joining in today. And we would love to keep hearing your comments, keep connecting with you on and off. Thank you so much.